Hello, everyone. This is React Roundup podcast. And today we have our guest panelists, Dave Ceddia.
Hey, everybody.
Leslie Cohn-Wein.
Hey, y'all.
I hope I pronounced y'all's names correctly. And our special guest today is Glenn Reyes.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, folks. I just want to let you know quickly about Netlify. Netlify is a really cool system for hosting what are traditionally known as static sites. However, the real benefit that I've been finding is that I don't have to mess with a back end. I can just set things up. I build the website out. I've been using a system called 11DJS, and you just deploy it. And then anything that you have that you want to do, you can do on the front end. So if you want to pull in some kind of database with Firebase or something else, if you want to collect form data, Netlify provides all kinds of services that make it easy to do all that stuff. If you're trying to do serverless, they have a really, really neat serverless setup that will allow you to deploy your websites without having to deploy a backend, and it'll do some of the work for you. I just love it. So if you're looking for a way that you can actually deploy a website that only has front-end technology in it, gives you all the tools that you typically need for the backend without having to actually program the backend, then give them a try. Go check them out at netlify.com.
So Glenn, can you talk a little bit about your background and how did you become a programmer? How did you find React and everything? Where are you from?
Hey, my name is Glenn. I'm a software engineer based from Vienna, Austria. And I've been programming professionally since 2013, where I just started as a jQuery developer. But I think the first time I ever started coding was maybe at around 14, where I just wanted to do some fancy GeoCities websites, and then I didn't notice that I just already did HTML. So today I'm just building applications and UIs with React and GraphQL. I created Graphpack, which is an open source project which is a zero configuration server for GraphQL, and I'm organizing also React Vienna meetups here,
Nice. One talk that is a very recent talk of yours, a current caught our attention, is the one about React Fill-In, that you're talking about a really interesting subject that I believe resonates with everyone doing programming for more than, I don't know how long, which is how do I draw the line between choosing a third party and a handcraft component in React? So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I talked about this topic because it's I often had the case where I was working in a team, and I was wondering, for example, why are we using CUID over Nano ID when it comes to generated IDs? Or maybe another one, why are we using Moment and not the smaller DJS, the same API when it comes to data APIs? You can ask the same one, for example, also when it comes to form libraries, or maybe date pickers or utility libraries, and it's a fundamental problem that we all face. And for that, I just decided to research more about the common holistics, the metrics that we just intrinsically take to decide whether to go with an external library or whether we should just write our own code to solve the problem, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the first thing that we usually learn when we are starting to dev is don't reinvent the wheel. So the first naive answer to that question would always just choose a library. Just never do it yourself. Is it the correct answer, in your opinion, after your research?
It's a very valid quote, I would say. So I wouldn't say that would answer everything that you wanna, every problem that you face. But for example, there are also libraries that do much more than you need, for example, right? So for example, if you wanna have this relative date in a short version, you might not need just a whole big date library for that. It might be just something smaller, or even write your own code for that, right? But that comes with the trade-off that if you, in case, needs later more from the data library, or that you might need more features? Like when is the point where you say at what percent of the API of the data library is it worth to switch to it, right? It's kind of hard to explain, but I think it's like,
yeah, I understand, because I've been in both situations. A situation where I was in a project that had Lodash just to use like 2 functions.
oh yeah, that's right.
They had like the whole Lodash thing. I've worked in projects that did not want to use Lodash, so they have like a utils.js file that it was like actually like rewriting Lodash because like every time they needed like a new util function, we would write one. So in the end, like we had like kind of like a worse version of Lodash.
Oh yeah, that's
implemented from scratch. So
yeah. The only reason we were using Lodash was like the get function, because it's so nice for turning into objects. And I was, at one point I was like, Lodash, you can install just like at Lodash/get or something, right? Like just that one function. Mm-hmm. So I remember thinking like, oh, I'll just go to GitHub and just copy and paste the code out of there. But there's all this like extra stuff, like extra Lodash utility functions. Like their code is very factored apart. So it's really hard to just pick out that one function.
I feel like I usually start by trying to write my own, and then I'll have some random to-dos in my utils file that's like, hey, when you add, 3 more functions to this file, maybe consider swapping it out for a library.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, this is good. And often like the case also, for example, I needed is touch or something like that from the moment library. Like the moment package is just really bad. I just needed to condition whether something is a touch device or not, or is touch enabled or not. So yeah, this is something. Yeah, sometimes an approach is also just copy paste utility functions and then just use it in your own code. But yeah, it depends on how much are you now copy pasting from something, or why don't you just take the library and then get benefits of it through the updates and all that.
Yeah, right. Because if you write it yourself, now you have to maintain it. You've got to write the tests. Hopefully you write the tests.
That's it. Yeah. Before we continue with that, in that line of like, now we have to maintain, I just want to comment about this quote. Something came to my mind. Now, I don't actually like the quote, do not try to reinvent the wheel, because we almost never need a wheel. It's like we need things that are round, that can be, that you can call it. It's like sometimes you're building a car and you need a tire. You're building, I don't know, like something else that you need a rounded thing. People say like, don't reinvent the wheel. We already have tires. Now, not everything that is rounded is a tire. So like it's not everything is as straightforward and as like generic. Most of the challenges that we encounter are really specific to our problems. A lot of times we say, don't reinvent it, we'll just use this ready-made thing. This ready-made thing, a lot of times it's not made for your particular problem. And then you end up having to solve your problem and then having to solve all the issues that came from using like the wrong library and using the wrong abstraction. So it's not as straightforward. It's a really like high-level art to find good abstractions and see your specific problem, and then find a really good abstraction that helps you with your specific problem. That's really
definitely. This is where our expertise come from. Is to like, what are these kind of decisions we do as a developer or as an architect?
Yes. Yeah.
Building features, like we have to do that. We just do it like constantly whenever we are coding, whenever we are like thinking about something. It's just this constant architectural decision that we are making, right?
Len, in your experience, I guess when you're like starting out on a new feature or something that you need to build and you are considering whether to use like a third-party library or something, how do you like start approaching that problem? What's the first step?
Yeah, well, first of all, I have my favorite libraries that I'm using. But we can split, I think, this whole thing up in several parts or several topics before it comes to a decision, right? So the first one is maybe like, if you think about the use case that you have or the problem that you have, like how complex is it to just write it on your own, right? Or just write something that on your own, or like how big is the thing that you're going to build, and what are the time like constraints to just rebuild it, or to just learn something that somebody else built for that. And there are a lot of like aspects that can be think about. For example, also what kind of API you want to have, or for example, if something else exists, what are the risks of like creating new bugs for that, or maybe something that exists that is actively maintained or something, right? So there are lots of like different aspects that has to be thought about when you want to pick something. If you are a lot in open source, you might have the question like, for example, what about popularity? Should I pick the library with the highest popularity? Or what about GitHub stars? Or what is popularity? Is it GitHub stars, or is it NPM downloads, or friends?
Yeah,
you know?
that seems to be like a common.
Yeah, now we have like the used by label on GitHub.
This popularity thing is interesting because we talk about, okay, so if we create the library ourselves, we'll need to maintain it. But a lot of times, if you are using a open source library that is not very popular, you end up having to, like in the worst case, make a fork and starts to maintain it, or you need to go through the whole process of contributing to it to fix or change whatever. And it's not like cost zero either. Like it can be fulfilling, it can be like good to like contribute back, but it's not cost zero. So it's easier to change something that is in a folder in your Git history than something that is open source too. So this is an interesting thing to think about. Yeah.
I mean, I think it always depends on what are you currently working on, right? So I wouldn't say that in general, but maybe I think most points you're gonna do that like direction. It's like a typical question for like how do you decide on a library, right? Mm-hmm. So GitHub stars, how well maintained is it? What are the latest commits and so on?
Yeah, so like going more concrete, imagine you have to create an autocomplete input, right? Something on a page of your product that is an autocomplete that goes to an API to gather items to show in a drop down. How would you start thinking about that problem? Where do you start? You have the design.
Yeah, I think the most important part here at first is like to understand the big picture of what you really need. And once you get that, you get a feel of what is out there. So, right. And this is also the next problem, to know what already exists. This is like very hard when it comes to like NPM packages or something kind of like solving parts of maybe similar problem. And and then once you have that, I just try to like build it. I just build it however works at the moment, and then think about like improving it later. So it's just this intrinsic like thoughts that you have when it comes to building something, right? But the decision that you make at first is just your own like knowledge that you, or like expertise that you have and that you want to like execute. So
I was just going to say, I think business constraints play into it also, right? Because you also kind of have to weigh who are the other stakeholders in the decision. My product manager, whoever is sort of running the project. You've got to consider how much time you have to build the thing. Having worked right now at a startup and before that at agencies, time is always a huge factor. But like Lucas said, you also have to consider the costs of time in the future, right, to maintain or to add functionality if it doesn't exist. So I've sort of done comparison studies when you're kind of in that research mode in the past, sort of laying out all the criteria for like the feature that you need right now. What are the things you need in that library now? Throw it all in a table so you can actually see how everything kind of stacks up. and then kind of make the decision from there. But then you always run into that problem on the other side, that once you need to build off it or continue to iterate, who knows if that library is going to continue to meet your needs.
That's it. Software developing is difficult. Every problem that I think about, I always think it's the most difficult problem. So, okay, yeah. So all the problems are difficult. But this one is this one is especially difficult one. It's like every decision we make is actually like dynamic. It's like time changes. Things are always changing. So like whatever you choose today, you have to think about like how is it going to evolve.
Even some of the indicators can become out of date too. I mean, like GitHub stars don't decay. I don't see people talking about this a lot, but if you've got like a 10-year-old library that has 10,000 stars, like it might be dead, but you know, the stars don't go to zero. And I think and the commits thing can be kind of a misleading indicator too, because if you look at projects like, you know, Redux Thunk or something where it hasn't had an update in forever because it's like 10 lines of code. Like that doesn't mean it's dead. It's just that it's done.
They may have solved pretty well that particular problem. That's why they don't need to change that much. Yeah.
You see it also at very like important libraries that are hardly touched, but hacked by others. You just see it afterwards.
Right. Yeah, it can also be a huge red flag if the thing is not updated. So it's really hard to tell, I guess. You have to sort of take all these things into account.
I think at the end of the day, what we are just trying to do is just to reduce harm as much as possible, like to reduce risks and any negative impacts as much as possible, right? So it doesn't matter actually in the end, like how well it was solved. The thing is just to decide on whether we have less work afterwards or not, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because we also need to fight a bunch of like irrational biases that we have because we're humans. So this is another thing. Like we need to, as you're saying, like we need to be as rational. Like we're like solving an engineering problem, right? So it's like if you're building a stadium, you don't need to be like, I can't imagine people being passionate about the type of concrete. I don't know. I've never built.
I'm sure there are people.
I'm sure, yeah.
That's their life's work.
I don't know. I'm going to look for blog posts of people that are advocates of one type of concrete, saying like concrete be considered harmful or things like that. I don't know. Because I would love to see a study like that, a psychological study. I believe, for instance, that we value more projects that have a logo when we see things on GitHub.
Yeah.
It's like it looks like people are, I don't know, like
it serious somehow.
It touches our irrational, I don't know what here, and so we need to, when we're talking about let's be like completely objective and try to understand the pros and cons, but we are also finding all these human, I don't know, biases that affect us. So it's very difficult, and people around us too. Like our teams also have like their own passions and stuff like that.
And while a logo might not matter in the long run, or GitHub badges or whatever, certainly good documentation matters, right? If you're using this, so sometimes those things are tied together. If there's a logo or there's a company behind the library, oftentimes there's more manpower, more people behind it. Maybe better docs, but all of those things don't necessarily correlate.
Perfect. Yeah. Maybe having a logo means that someone is like taking care of it, like so much that they're even thinking about the logo. Maybe it's a good sign. Maybe having a logo is a good sign that someone is really like someone really wants to.
Yeah, it's something that you give love to, right?
Yes.
Why doesn't have everything a logo?
Another indicator.
At least an emoji.
It seems like that's sort of that's what a lot of these indicators are meant to decide, right? Like how well taken care of is the thing. And so like if it is well taken care of, then I won't have to take care of it myself. It seems like that's the golden library, is like the one you can install and just like either it'll work out of the box forever or it'll automatically get updates forever, but you won't have to think about it and it'll just do exactly what you want. And it doesn't seem like that ever really happens.
Thinking about another concrete example here, I have the Graphpack GitHub open in front of me. It was built by you, right, Glenn? It has a great logo, and it even has a list with emojis, which is also a big thing. Like what is included? Every item has an emoji. This is really cool. So what would you say, like if I have this problem to solve, like my company decided to start a GraphQL server, like how would I go between doing everything like handcrafted here or using Graphpack, using your library? When it makes sense to use your library, when it doesn't? How would you say?
Well, it depends on what exactly you are building around, or what the environment around GraphQL would be. I think if you want to play around and just get started with the core concepts of GraphQL, then Graphpack might be a nice start to just get started with, just writing down the schema and writing down resolvers. But if you want to learn how, or if you want to extend, if you want to be more flexible with the server, for example, if you have a serverless environment or something like that, then the solution that I use in Graphpack internally would be a better start. I guess if you want to learn more about, or if you need more power of the GraphQL server, then I think just going with Apollo or something else would be a better start. So Graphpack is just helping beginners to get started with GraphQL.
So that's how you would describe your library?
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that what I tried to solve with Graphpack is not to restrict the API that, for example, Apollo has. This is what I'm using here internally, but it's just setting some sensible defaults for a server that you almost don't need anything to do when you want to use that.
Yeah, so it's like create React app sort of for GraphQL.
Exactly, yeah.
That's awesome.
Or Next.js. Yeah, it's just...
Yeah, for a agent-like environment, this is gold, right, Leslie?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So one other question about this subject. We have this conundrum of library, handcrafted. What about buying stuff, buying products, buying solutions? Is it the same mindset? Is it a different mindset? Like when, for instance, I worked in a company before that they were having some custom dashboards for performance monitoring. And then we decided on stop doing that and pay for a speed curve. And it's a product with support and stuff like that. Do you think it's the same mindset when you're making those choices?
I think it's very similar. I mean, it's different. Let's take it from the other perspective. When you sell something that is very high quality code or something, or if you want to sell something, then that means that you take care a lot of how you want to sell it. It's like my emojis on my Graphpack documentation and the logo, right? But if you sell something for example, chart libraries or I don't know, something very high quality, then that means that there's a lot of hard work has been that there has a lot of been work done behind that. That also means that you provide probably a lot more support when it comes to special problems. But all that doesn't mean that open source or maybe free software is all that bad, right? It's just a little different. I wouldn't buy something if I can't test it before, or if I get the money back if I don't want it anymore, or if I don't need it, or I wouldn't waste money just for trying or just for finding out if it's something that fits to you, right?
Yeah, there's also the issue, I guess, of whether or not you can change it later. Because with open source, at least, if it doesn't meet your needs, you can probably open it up and try to figure it out and modify it. But purchasing, sometimes you can. Sometimes it's just you buy the source code. But also sometimes they obfuscate it and you can't change it. And then you've got to go back to the company and hope for the best.
I just think you have different expectations as a developer. If you're purchasing something, if your company's purchasing something, right? You said that support, is a huge piece of it. And some of that transparency around kind of the buying process. I agree, I would always want to prototype using it, figure out what are the limits? Does this really meet my needs? How's it going to scale with me moving forward? And how responsive are they? Also, do they take like feature requests somewhere online? Like if I did have something I wanted to add, is that an option? I think those are all things I would ask.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are topics or there are like parts where to buy it is often the better like solution. For example, I don't know, CI deployments or bug reporting software. I think I would never like build something on my own, but
Servers.
I'm sure there are like open source solutions. Yeah, servers basically. But when you're building on the front end something, then I don't know. Yeah, maybe some things are nice to buy. I wouldn't like create your own like font face for your corporate or something. But yeah, if you have like very small utilities.
Yeah, sometimes I hear people saying things like, "Oh, this whole website could be like a Magento website instead of like a super React website," and things like that. So this is, I actually like don't have the right answer for those things. Sometimes things are just like hard to change, so you just have to go with the flow, do what have been done. But usually I try to think about, okay, what's the mission, right? What's the mission of the company? What's my mission here? What do I need to do? And how can I work on things that actually differentiate myself or the company in going forward with the mission? Like usually managing server is like such a generic work that I don't need to use my brain power to make sure that the servers are available. So I better like pay AWS to do it. Or the same thing with Speed Curve, like they sold really well, like performance monitoring. Why, instead of making an internal dashboard in React for performance monitoring, I should be doing the actual product and just leave it to Speed Curve. But it's not as straightforward because there's always like a little bit things here and there. They're not like 100% the way we need. And like every time you choose to go with a ready-made solution, be it a library or something you buy, there will always be some people who will say like, see, like if we built from scratch, we would have like this feature that
nothing is perfect. It's funny. Yeah. It's sort of like there's sort of the two different maybe curves where it's really easy in the beginning and then it gets harder, or it's really hard in the beginning and then it gets easier. I think it can kind of go both ways. Like if you build it from scratch, sometimes that's easier in the beginning because it's like, you know how to use the thing, you know it's doing exactly what you want. And then when you have to maintain it 6 months later, you're like, oh man, like why did I write it this way? This is terrible. And then you have the opposite, I think, with something that you install where like it might start off easy and then, you know, it bites you down the road. Or it might start off really annoying. You're like, well, geez, I really should have written this myself because like it's so hard to use this API or whatever. It just doesn't fit my mental model. But then once it clicks, then it's like, oh, okay, great. This is great now. I think like React is that way for me in the beginning, and for a lot of people where like you just feel weird about the whole like thinking statefully in JSX and stuff. And then once you get over, you're like, oh, this is great. Like I get it now. And so it gets easier over time. But yeah, I don't know. You sort of don't know until you get into it though.
And to that point, I think you also have to think about the people on your team or the other developers that you might be working with or future developers on whatever it is you're building, right? Because you have to get over that hump, but then you have to expect that they're also going to have to do that if you're choosing something that requires like a lot of knowledge or domain knowledge or something like that. So for me, when I'm choosing a library, it's also this sort of balance between what are the other people on my team proficient at, what are their skill sets, how can I choose something that's going to be like long-term, something that other developers can adopt relatively easily.
Yeah, kind of optimizing for that ramp-up curve, making it easy.
Yeah, because if you think about, we only have enough time to code some number of lines. Like we're only going to be really effective if we can accelerate everyone around us, right? So if we're making a decision that only make like yourself faster, it doesn't help much.
Yeah, I think it's a huge benefit if you build something that will save time over a long period.
Yeah,
and that at a cost that you take a lot of time. So that's.
But it's so difficult. Yeah. And some changes you make are so difficult to change in the future, as you said. Like if let's start with like we're starting the company now. We're writing the first code. There's going to production. Let's just start with Python. It's going to be Python forever. This Python is going to be with you forever. So like whatever you choose, let's start with C# and then we figure it out. There's no figuring it out. It's going to be C# forever. This legacy thing, like it's gonna be with you for at least the next 10 years of your life. Like it's crazy how some
prototypes never die.
Yeah, they never. It's complicated. Lately, I've been thinking about like I like really solutions that are either like brilliant. They're like, oh my God, this really solved the problem. This is great. Or I go with like the blandest, like boring solutions. You know, like, oh, I'm gonna start writing my servers in this like language that I just found out about. This is gonna be with you for the next 10 years. It better be brilliant. If not, like go with the Python, with the
go with the well understood thing.
Yeah, because some decisions really will be your companions for years and years.
Yeah. It's similar if you wanna start something with JavaScript or just go with TypeScript, right? It's like there is already like I think even asking this is already just so many different opinions. I think in your team. I mean, there's also the way if you just start progressively, like go with JavaScript and then like later add TypeScript. But there is always like these different decisions that you have to make when it comes to building something. The thing is, I think that we as developers want to avoid is like this over engineering, right?
Yeah. Since the decisions will be with you forever, make less decisions. Because you at least will have like some.
I think it's mostly beneficial if it's not an over engineer. But it doesn't mean that it's easier to use, right? With something is over engineered. It's just some mentality that we have or we do when we use something that's very easy to use, or if there's something that exists that's very easy to use but is over engineered.
There's also that balance between, going with something that's on the bleeding edge that you're really excited about versus going with something sort of tried and true that's been around a little bit longer. And that, I think, also always plays into the conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know, trying out the newest of the greatest, but doesn't mean that this is the most stable one or most like common thing that's.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, we need to be careful. Like really, whenever we are trying something new, I always try to think of, okay, we need to make like a clear experiment. Like, what do we want to learn with this? Like, make something like self-contained. This is a good thing about React, since it isolates things well isolated in components. Sometimes if you want to experiment, I want to experiment with Elm. You can make like a component written in Elm. And then if you don't like it, if you say like, okay, this is, you don't need to get married with Elm and create like the whole application and migrate everything. You can like put it on only one component, or as we talked with David Piano last week, like I'm going to use the state machine. You can make like one component, put it there, see if you like it or not. Like it's a good experiment, well contained, small. And then like I will either use it or not. But sometimes if you're like, I'm going to start writing all these microservices with this language, this is going to be our language for years.
Yeah. The microservices thing too, I feel like is also, I think for a lot of...
I don't understand everything that starts with micro. And it's at the moment.
Yeah. Micro front ends. Yeah. It does feel like you can go too far in the
easy and smaller.
I guess maybe that's it. Like it feels easier and smaller, but then you've got 10 of them instead of one bigger thing. And like it's like that Yagni problem, right? That you ain't gonna need it thing where like you're designing for your millions of users when you have 0 users. It's just like extra complexity.
Yeah, it's really complicated because instead of having like one big thing, you have 10 small things that in isolation, they are really easy to think about, but the problems is on the integration. And no one can run the 10 things in their own computer, and it's really difficult to test. It's really difficult to understand.
It's not the 10 things, it's the 100 lines that connect the 10.
That's it. Yeah, the connections become the problem. And it's really, really difficult to test the connections and to understand what is happening. Yeah, it's not a straightforward problem to solve either.
I love that idea of kind of being able to experiment with things in sort of isolation or in small components, small areas. And also, I think a big part of that is documenting your findings. I think we talk a lot about just writing the code, but a big part of it when you're talking about third-party code or testing something out is what did you learn from it? Do you want to move forward with it? Do you not? Here are the reasons why we shouldn't consider this in the future.
Perfect.
I think that also comes into play when we're talking about the third-party libraries, right? If you prototyped with something, maybe leave notes for the future developer about why maybe you did or didn't go with that solution, so they have that knowledge.
This is so important. And yeah, I always try to do that. Like I'm still trying to find like what's the best tool to do that. Like usually in the companies I work, they have Confluence or some wiki like that.
Yeah, we use Notion.
What do you use?
We use Notion.
Yeah, Notion's good.
Never used it.
Yeah, Notion is great. I think most of the time when we are coding, we're also spending like time on researching. Like that's actually what you just touched. And I think the time you spend on researching should also spend some time on what have you researched. So
yes,
that's why document what you just did.
Yeah, the thing is probably that documentation is the most important documentation is what is not in the code. There's no code comments. There's no clean code for that, right? It's like, what about all the failed experiments? Things that you tried and you're not using now, and why you're not using, because like it won't be in the code. There's not even like a place for you to put any comments or any markdowns inside your code. So it needs to be somewhere else, and it's like really important knowledge if you think about, because people can say like why are we using Redux Saga instead of Redux Thunk? We're not using Thunk. Like maybe in the past someone was doing that kind of experimentation, like reach some conclusions. Where is it? Where did you put those comments?
Maybe there's a good reason this thing isn't here. Yep, definitely.
Yeah. Wow, interesting.
It's like similar to the situation when you try to like reduce Redux code in general, but at the other end, other people are still like adding up Redux stuff. It's like probably a communication thing, but it's similar to this kind of problem.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of instances where if you don't have that knowledge, it's really tempting to go in and change it to the thing that you feel most comfortable with, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Finding a way to avoid that.
That's it. First thing you go, like npm install Redux Thunk.
Yeah, and you just start looking over your shoulder, like, should I do this? Because I want to, but I don't think. Maybe there's a reason they didn't.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. So it's interesting.
This episode is sponsored by Sentry.io. Recently, I came across a great tool for tracking and monitoring problems in my apps. Then I asked them if they wanted to sponsor the show and allow me to share my experience with you. Sentry provides a terrific interface for keeping track of what's going on with my app. It also tracks releases so I can tell if what I deployed makes things better or worse. They give you full stack traces and as much information as possible about the situation when the error occurred to help you track down the errors. Plus, one thing I love, you can customize the context provided by Sentry. So, if you're looking for specific information about the request, you can provide it. It automatically scrubs passwords and secure information, and you can customize the scrubbing as well. Finally, it has a user feedback system built in that you can use to get information from your users. Oh, and I also love that they support open source to the point where they actually open sourced Sentry if you want to self-host it. Use the code devchat at Sentry.io to get 2 months free on Sentry's small plan. That's code devchat at Sentry.io.
All right, so let's start picks today with you, Dave. Do you have any picks?
Sure. I've only got one. Actually, it's pretty relevant though. So I saw this link the other day called boringtechnology.club. It's this. It's like the slide. Pretty much the slides from a talk called "Choose Boring Technology" by a guy named Dan McKinley, and it's pretty much all about this, like picking the old mature stuff. Building your thing with like just a couple services or just a couple technologies, like using Python and Postgres, and not going after the shiny new stuff because it's going to work in 10 years. And it's well understood, where where the problems are and everything. And yeah, so I think it's a good one.
Nice. Leslie, do you have any picks for today?
Yeah, there's a new podcast I'm kind of excited about called the Ladybug Podcast. 4 women in tech are leading that. Ali Spittle, Emma, Lindsay, Kelly. Sorry, I didn't say all your last names, but they're talking about debugging the tech industry, which is super cute name, Ladybug. So ladybug.dev, they released their first episode, which was sort of about like career trajectories in computer science, which is really interesting. I'm stoked just to hear from more voices in the podcast world. And then my other totally non-related pick is that we recently got a Big Green Egg, which is like a grill smoker.
Nice.
Oh my God.
It's amazing. Wes Boss is also a huge fan and talks about these nonstop, but my partner is all about smoking literally everything. Highly recommend.
Oh my God, I love that. Yeah. Last week, a neighbor of mine, he bought a green egg and we said like, let's grill some meat on it. And we almost killed everyone involved.
Oh no.
We could not, we're still learning. Like things were really get out of control. Yeah, but it's amazing. It's amazing.
I wanted to get one of those, but I think it would collapse my deck.
Yeah, they're huge.
Yeah.
Yes. So my pick for today is this really cool. I love these CSS solutions for stuff. So I saw this how do I pronounce it? DevTool blog post, and it's top 20 CSS navigation menus by Lawrence, which was really cool ideas and really cool solutions. So I always like to look at those and understand what's happening here and there. Like CSS is an amazing world and super fun to build things purely with CSS. And Glenn, do you have any picks? Any links you would like to share?
Oh yeah, I have actually, I think, a link, but I probably can share it later. But there's a person on Instagram, like a female developer called Lydia Halley, and she's doing like great like JavaScript questions as Instagram stories, which is really nice to.
Oh, that's a cool idea.
It's nice to follow. So I can maybe send the link here.
Nice. Yeah, that's really cool.
She's sending like very basic JavaScript questions, or maybe sometimes like very difficult ones. But she also got like a GitHub repository about that, where she lists all the questions, and it's really interesting if you like want to like keep up with fundamental JavaScript or just basically, or sometimes React questions. It's nice.
That's cool. Yeah. So Glenn, thank you very much. It was an honor having you in the podcast. And yep, until next week, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Bye. Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.